So I'm having a lot of difficulty with my Wi-Fi connection today. So I'm going to have to record the session for you to watch, and I encourage you to watch it because there are some incredibly important Easter eggs in here that I'm going to share with you. It's not going to be the entire 45 minutes. It'll be much shorter than that, but I want to make sure that you have some information for our last week next week. But you see my screen, week number 6 classes, English. I wanted to share with you a quote that I absolutely love. Those of you who follow me on my teacher Instagram account have seen this. I love quotes. I collect quotes. I have since I was in middle school. And certainly with everything that's going on today, I thought that it would be important to share this quote with you because it's relevant to what's going on. And I'm going to maybe decipher it when I'm done. It's from Robert F. Kennedy. It is from numberless diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. Each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest wall of oppression and resistance. And it's important to understand what he's saying here. Essentially, he's saying, no matter how big or small, doing good things, doing kind acts, sends an energy out into the universe that combines with other good acts and becomes this huge positive influence in the world. Robert F. Kennedy gave this speech. It's called Ripple of Courage. On a visit to South Africa, where he was visiting Nelson Mandela, and he was speaking out against apartheid. And he came home to the United States 2 weeks later and was assassinated. So what I want to challenge you all to do for next week, for our last class, there's not going to be an enduring question that we're going to work on or anything like that. I really want you to go out and find a powerful, meaningful quote to you. A quote that speaks to you, a quote that is in some way, shape, or form your mirror. If you remember our conversation about mirrors last week. Just a quote that you can share with everyone. Make sure it's something that you feel comfortable sharing because you're going to paste yours into the chat. And we're just going to talk about these quotes as a way to end this crazy roller coaster of a school year. So, with that said, I know some of you are bored to death. The author of Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, has started something pretty spectacular. It's called the Ichabod. Years and years and years ago, she decided to write a children's story. It wasn't called the Ichabod, but it was about this world and these characters. And she would finish a chapter, and each night she would, when she was putting her kids to bed, she would read from her new story. And she decided to go in a different direction in terms of publishing her next novel, and she decided to write an adult book. But during quarantine, she went up into her attic where she put this story, and she brought it back down, and she did a lot of editing and revising and took bits out and put bits in, and then she reread it to her children, and they were like, Mom, it was kind of better the way it was. So she put those bits back in, and what she has decided to do is to release this book for free at www.ichabod.com. Each week she's going to be releasing a chapter or 2 or 3. And I just think it's fascinating that she's doing this for us. It's a fantastic story so far. And I encourage you, if you're bored, to go to www.ichabod.com. There's also an illustration contest. She is challenging people to illustrate the different chapters. And pictures are going to be actually selected for this book when it is published in the fall. So it's an exciting opportunity to be engaged artistically as well. So that's the Ichabod. We're not going to necessarily do this, but I just want you to think about this. Last week we talked about how we figure out who to trust if there is differing information coming at us. And we did some really cool discussions about it last week. But in my first period, in between the difficulty with Wi-Fi, I asked them this. When the protagonist and antagonist are giving the reader differing information, is it always the right thing to trust the protagonist over the antagonist? Or are there cases where we might trust the antagonist more than the protagonist? So think about that. When might we trust the antagonist more than the protagonist if we're getting differing information as the reader? It's kind of a deep, fantastic question. If we were all together, we'd be able to discuss it. Some cool things came out first period about when we might trust the antagonist more than the protagonist. So think about that, or think as you're reading your book, do you trust the antagonist sometimes more than the protagonist? And also, we talked about why many adults only consult one source of news and information. Why is that the case? And what is that source of news or information that they gravitate to, and what impacts that or influences it? So that's just building off of last week's conversation about how we figure out the truth. In the Digital Reader's Toolbox this week, I had you all looking at symbolism on one of your slides, and so I want you to really think about this concept of symbolism in literature. It's powerful. We've said many, many, many times, every single decision an author makes is purposeful and meaningful. So the symbolism is no exception. Why do authors include the symbols in their writing, in their fiction, that they do? But first, we need a working definition. So here's our working definition. Symbolism is the use of symbols to signify ideas and qualities by giving them symbolic meanings that are different from their literal sense. So think about it. You know what symbols are. You know what a rose symbolizes. You know what a heart symbolizes. You know what a peace sign symbolizes. You know what a white flag symbolizes. And if you don't, it means sort of surrender, giving up. But I want you in your mind, and I'm going to give you about 15 seconds between each of these to help me figure this out. What does a dove symbolize? If you came across a dove being referenced in a work of fiction, what might the author be trying to communicate to you? What does a dove represent or symbolize? If you said this, then good job. Doves are used as a sign of peace or tranquil state of mind. In a spiritual context, it can be used to symbolize grace or divinity. But on the other hand, what do you think a raven symbolizes? Edgar Allan Poe used ravens. Lots of authors use ravens or other sort of dark birds. Harper Lee used mockingbirds, much different than a raven. If you thought this, good job. Ravens feed on corpses. So audiences naturally identify it with a bad omen. The symbol can be used to foretell death and disaster, meaning if a character sees a raven in some sort of way and it's highlighted, it may be an example of the element of fiction known as what? Starts with an F. Foreshadowing. Good. What do you think water represents in writing, in literature? Water. Think about water. What do you think about when you think about water? Vital for survival, water represents birth, fertility, and cleansing. In creation stories, life emerges from primordial waters. So oftentimes in those types of genres, water is introduced or used as symbolism. How about fire? A lot of opposing pieces here. If water symbolizes more tranquil pieces, fire, a raging fire can symbolize anger, punishment, and destruction. But on the other hand, it can also signify rebirth, as in the mystery of the phoenix or the myth of the phoenix. So think about that. There's a chapter in To Kill a Mockingbird where Miss Maudie's house burns down, and it's very symbolic. Likewise, a phoenix. What does a phoenix represent? Those mythical birds. Harry Potter, Professor Dumbledore had a phoenix. A mythological bird, the phoenix is known to emerge from its own ashes. So it signifies rebirth, renewal, immortality. How about a rainbow? If a character sees a rainbow, what do you think of what is associated with a rainbow? How does a rainbow form? Think about that process in nature. Often seen after rain, the rainbow signifies new beginnings, hope, the fulfillment of a dream, and the promise of prosperity. How about the sun? References to the sun being a factor in a scene. The star around which the Earth and other planets orbit, the sun represents the self, life, power, glory, foresight, and vision. But then the moon, what does the moon represent? There's a scene in Mockingbird with the moon being really relevant. The body that orbits the Earth, the moon represents femininity, the rhythm of time, eternity, and the dark side of nature. So really important to keep that in mind. Symbols as things or items or animals, which we'll get into here a little bit more deeply. But think about colors and how symbolism is represented through colors. A color of a woman's dress as she enters a scene, and it's highlighted or signified. A color of a house or of a door in a story. What do you think of when you think of the color black? If it's included or highlighted or signified or highlighted in a story. Oftentimes, authors use it to represent death or evil. And this is traditional over the years as authors of literature. But what do we think of when we think of white, or if white is referenced in a story? It might stand for life, purity. Wedding dresses are white. How about this? How about red? And it's probably easy to think of blood, but it goes much deeper than that. It can symbolize blood or passion or danger or an immoral character. Red clothes is often used in stories and in shows or movies based on books. How about purple? I was surprised by first period getting this pretty accurately. Purple is a royal color. Signifies royalty. How about yellow? What do you think of when you think of yellow? Might surprise you what yellow represents in literature. It stands for violence or decay. How about blue? What does blue represent? Blue represents peacefulness and calm. I bet you got that one. So think of colors as they are represented in stories, but also think of animals. There's a scene in Mockingbird where there's a rabid dog. We know what we think of when we think of dog, but what is a rabid dog? Or how about a bear in a story? How about a character comes across a bear? What is that supposed to signify? Or a bear is referenced, or a character is wearing a bear necklace. Might represent courage, or someone's in danger. How about a butterfly? Butterflies, they go through a really interesting life process. Think of how it starts off. How does a butterfly start? What does a butterfly start as? A caterpillar. So it can symbolize great transformation in a character or in a family or in a town. How about a dog? We know that a dog represents loyalty and devotion, but what would a rabid dog represent? A rabid dog, this symbol of loyalty and devotion that's turned evil or dangerous. What might that portend or foreshadow? As in the rabid dog in Mockingbird. How about a snake? If an author references a snake, might symbolize corruption or darkness. Weather is a factor as well. Weather is symbolic, always in stories. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but if a character is in fog or mist or can't really see through the clouds, might represent a bad omen or something terrible on the horizon. Or if there's a storm coming, a storm referenced or being talked about, or a storm happens overnight, it might symbolize hostility or turmoil. How about snow? Scout wakes up one morning and the entire town is blanketed in a pristine white blanket of snow for the first time in years. This often comes with a message of calmness or purity. So think of symbolism as you go through and you read, and the importance of it and the power of it and why authors chose the symbols they chose. This is something that you all came up with. In the Google form, you shared with me these things. I think Mockingjay in the Hunger Games series represents the rebellion. The Death Star from Star Wars symbolizes the evils of military technology. In The Beauty and the Beast, the flower represents love. You guys all collected these. A Mockingbird and To Kill a Mockingbird symbolizes innocence. The Black Lives Matter fist symbolizes protest, defiance, solidarity. In my book, this guy made his bed as an accomplishment to get his day going. And his bed was a symbol of completing a task. Absolutely. So look for symbolism. But switching gears here, our enduring question this week was, when is a piece of writing finished? And your answers were all over the board, as they are every week, and it's fascinating to see what you all come up with. I'm going to share a couple of them, but it's not as easy and as cut and dry as you think it is. When is a piece of writing finished? Someone said something very literally. Writing can always be revised and refined. The process of writing is long and complex. First, you must brainstorm on what you're going to write about and the topics you're going to include. Then you create a rough draft. After you create a draft, you revise, and revise some more. The revision stage is the longest stage, and it will take you a fair bit of time before you can even start your final draft. Now that we completed all the steps in the writing is complete. Well, that's literally what a piece of writing is done. I hope that I taught you this year. But I was going for something a little bit more, I guess, figurative or deep. Is it as simple as this? You ask yourself, do you agree with this or disagree? My writing is finished when I'm satisfied with it. In first period, we concluded that I think this is a mistake that we often make. I think we get done with a piece of writing and we think, okay, I'm good with this. When in reality, there's so much that can be done to improve it. Do you agree with this one? I thought this was kind of fascinating. Fictional pieces of writing are never finished. There's always more that can be added to a story. There is also no limit to how long the story can continue. Even if the author decides to discontinue writing that story, another person could theoretically continue it. Is this true? Are fictional pieces never finished? Do you agree with that? It's an interesting concept. Fictional pieces are never really finished. This was a good one. We all write for a number of reasons. It may be to inspire people or to tell a fascinating story. When I read the question, when is a piece of writing finished, I immediately thought, well, when it has a beginning, middle, and end. But then I thought about the question more, when is a piece of writing actually finished? I ultimately came up with the conclusion that a piece of writing is finished once you've accomplished your reason for writing. For example, say you decide to write a novel about a creature that appears in the moon. If you intended to scare the audience, then you would ask yourself, is my story scary? Once you've made it terrifying, then your piece of writing is finished. See how deeply you guys are thinking about these questions? But I think this was very interesting. A piece of writing is never finished until the author's subconscious mind is no longer working on it. When they just stop thinking about it. They know it's time to give it to the editor and to fix the mistakes and be published. When is a piece of writing finished? I often think, certainly as 8th graders, we think it's finished earlier than it's actually finished. And that's what I would challenge you to do next year. Ask yourself, is this truly finished? Have I accomplished everything that I wanted to accomplish when I set out? Have I evoked the emotions that I wanted to evoke? Am I still thinking about this at all? Consciously or subconsciously? Can I continue this in any way? Certainly if it's fictional. Non-fiction is a little bit different. I thank you for sending in your responses to this week's question. I think these have been interesting over the weeks. But I asked you to come up with 6-word autobiographies, and what you shared is just inspiring and fantastic. And I wanted to share just a couple of them. I got a lot of them, but we don't have a whole lot of time to share a whole lot of them. So here are your 6-word autobiographies that I chose to share. Doing art makes me feel happy. And think, guys, as you're going through this, I want you to identify if you can pick out one 6-word autobiography that for you is a mirror. Find one that for you is a mirror. This next one kind of relates to that. Never see myself in the mirror. Think of what these people are trying to communicate. Sleeping in class feels really good. We can probably take that for face value. Stuck at home, but always going adventuring. Every day is another day to overthink. Went in nervous, came out confident. I am a kind and respectful person. Work hard every day. I'm never satisfied. I explained what my name means. I am human, no threat. Life's always moving. Friends can't last. Broke so many glasses, lost count. First, understand them, then you'll acknowledge. I might need some extra time. Laughing is a way of life. Grandma, grandpa, uncle, now I'm next. Secrets are for those without trust. And finally, why can't I just be me? Powerful, guys. You really tackled this in inspiring and deeply thought out ways. And I think it's an interesting way to bring our writing this year to a conclusion. Do you see a mirror in any of these 6-word autobiographies? Are any of these a mirror for you? Think about which might be a mirror for you and why. So I'll just end like this. As I started, next week, there is no form or enduring question. I want you to come up with your favorite, most powerful quote. Have it copied so you can copy and paste it into the chat when you're ready. I'm going to be really fascinated. If you don't have one that speaks to you, find one that speaks to you. Go out and look for one. Be voracious in your search for a quote that right now, as a 13 or 14-year-old, it speaks to you. I thank you all very much. I look forward to next Wednesday. I'm sorry my Wi-Fi isn't working very well today. I'm sure it'll be better next Wednesday. Stay safe, and I will talk to you all soon. Now I don't know how to end this.